Hi guys, welcome to Buzz Magazine. I'm Aniesha and today I have Jay with me. He recently launched his the first two books of his trilogy. I think it's going to be a trilogy, or do you plan to write more? Ready for the World?
Four, actually.
Okay,
It's a four book plan.
Series. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So our first question to you is, what started your journey as a writer?
Well, it was something I started when I was in high school. I was writing it kind of as a journal, just to kind of get through, because you're a teenager, you're thinking about all these things, how to get through college, how to get through school, how to get through, with all the stuff that you can go around. So I started writing it down, and I started it as just a journal, and then I turned it into a screenplay, but I didn't know how to write a screenplay.
Oh.
So after a while, I just started turning it into just like all the books and all the stories that I was reading in school. So I wrote it as narrative form, and I wrote it for a little while. I put it aside after college. I went to medical school, studied radiology, and I was talking to my wife about it. And I said, I really wanted to go back to do that book sometime. And she said, well, why don't you? This is the perfect time to do it. We had a young son, but he was starting to go back to school. So I had a little of time. So, so I just kind of listened to her. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And here we are.
So this is the first thing that you remember writing, or were you writing when you were way younger as well?
I wrote some. Well, I wrote something when I was in high school. I got an electric typewriter. It was one of the first things I ever got. There was first there was a manual typewriter. I don't know if you remember those things.
Yeah, I do.
But my mom had one, and I found it in the garage. We were cleaning up, and I gave it a shot. I just kind of tried doing that. Those things are hard to type on. So I was using like a pencil. I would just hit the keys really hard, right?
Wow.
And then they got me an electric typewriter, so I started using that, and I wrote this kind of screenplay, really, really just cheesy, awful, kind of good guys are good, bad guys are bad guys, and it was just really, really awful. So that's kind of the first thing I remember doing, and I was probably maybe 15 years old.
Oh. Yeah, I think everybody has this one story where the first thing I wrote was so terrible, I did not want the world to see it. Most people we've spoken to have said that.
Oh God, yeah. It was just something that I was really, I don't know. I kind of shudder when I think about it. Even some of the stuff that I did in high school, because I kept it. A lot of the form of when I first started the book, I kept some of the things in it. But after going to college and going to my workshops and getting my degree and meeting with my professors and seeing other writers, especially. I really got a good look of what good writing is supposed to be like. And knowing that I wasn't doing it well. So I worked on that with, I went through my workshops, I went through my group things. We always did that in college. And I took that book out again, and I kind of retooled it. I changed some of the character names. I changed the settings, the storyline. But I kept the idea of it being set in my high school days when I was set as a teenager, basically, but with a different outlook. Now that I'm older, I can kind of look back and see all the things that I did and how I did it and what I did wrong, mostly. But I wanted to keep that kind of consistency of being young and making those mistakes in the book. Because you're not perfect, and nobody ever is. I mean, even now, I'm always making mistakes, It's just I can kind of handle it better. But when you were 15, 16, you don't really know. And everything means so much more than it does now. I mean, you kind of let things roll off your back. Some things still bother you, but you learn how to deal with it better. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that whether Ready for the World was influenced by your own life, but I think you already answered that. So I'm going to ask you this, that were there things that you changed so big to be in the way that you wish they were, or
Oh, okay. Well, there's a few things I changed. I mean, the characters that I created, they're very much based on me. The lead character is based on me quite a bit. The lead female character, Allie, is kind of she's kind of a mix of people, actually, of my life. There's one girl in particular that a lot of the story is based of how we were and how she was, but she's kind of a mix of some of the girls that I knew growing up and just kind of knowing throughout my life. So there's a lot of that. So I did change quite a bit of that. But some of my friends, the characters in the book, they're very much like that. I think I may have changed maybe 5%, 10% of it. Especially Josh. I think he's very much like the person, my friend in my life, who we're still great friends now. He's still very much like that. So he's kind of the guy who keeps me in check and kind of tells me exactly how it is. So and he's a great friend. He's my best friend to be around, and we always have a great laugh about everything.
So, well, you just said that Brandon Dela Cruz, the lead character, he is based on you quite a bit. Is there something that he can do that you can't, or vice versa, that you ensure that he can't do it because you can?
I think he's a better basketball player than I was. I talk about that. I played a little bit in high school. I think I made my character, the book, a little better player than me. But there's a lot in there. A lot of the things that are said, a lot of things that happened were kind of word for word. After doing some research, I talked to my friends and people who were there. I'd ask them how it was. It's like, is that how it really happened? He goes, yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. You did this, or she said that, or you guys did this. Like, oh, okay. So a lot of it is fodder for the book. And I think a lot of writers do that. You find stuff that kind of pertains to your life, and some things that make you laugh, things that make you cry, things that make you think, and you kind of keep that in there maybe in a file somewhere. So, but yeah, I would say I think Brandon has much more. Brandon has more success with women than I did when I was 16. He has a little bit of a better time. I think a lot of the stories that I based it on are kind of based through my late high school and my college years. So there's a lot of that there that I put into the book. But no, he's probably a better basketball player and a better, maybe just a better in love than I was.
Coming to Brandon's story, was it a conscious decision to ensure, split his story into 4 parts?
I wanted to do it in this 4-year period.
Okay.
So I really wanted to make sure I wanted to go into starting his sophomore year, which is 10th grade, and then finish after graduation. So I didn't have it as a 6-part book every time. I didn't think about that because a lot of things happens. The first book starts in the summer of 86, right? And I just kind of covered those 6 months in there. So it's kind of like a chapter a month. But then when I started to do the second book, it was more like I had to kind of keep in mind where the stories was going to go if I started from the very beginning of the year. So I was able to kind of put things together, chronologically. And it just kind of worked out that it was going to be 4 books for those 4 years. I think that's all it was. And I try to pay attention to, the things that happened and try to keep, especially the cultural references, sports, news, movies, music. I tried to keep it as close as I could to that time period. I really want to make sure that if this story is taking place in February 1987, that this song was on, this movie was in the theaters, this is what was happening in the world. So I wanted to keep that in mind. So yeah, I really kind of keep those years separated. And when you get older, then it starts to change a little bit more. So I really wanted to bring that kind of growth. I guess it's a growth curve for the characters.
But you're essentially writing at a time. Obviously, you grew up. It's your lived reality. But is it a little hard to constantly ensure that, okay, this is what really happened? For example, right now we are over a Zoom call and I'm interviewing you. That is not something we would have done in 1987.
Yes, exactly. It was something that I had to be very conscious of. I mean, I was always checking to see if it's like, were CDs a thing? Was I using a tape deck still? Was I, obviously I didn't have a cell phone then.
Yes.
So I kept in contact. I kept thought of what size were the TVs back then. I mean, the one that we had at home, how big was that? It's like, it was a monster TV at 24 inches, which is really nothing now. I mean, that's smaller than a computer, but that was supposed to be a big screen TV then. So I really did try to stay, like with pagers was something that that was a technology that we were using back then. So I used that, and that's kind of a plot point in the first chapter of the book, where Allie's pager goes off in the middle of their dance. So, and he's looking to see where she might be maybe at the telephones. So these are all things that kind of worked out that I kept in mind, because then it actually adds to the tension, because you couldn't shoot her a text, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
Or you couldn't do a Zoom call and say, yeah, it's like, where is she? It's like, I don't know, just check her, check her voicemail, or check an email, or, just check her GPS, see if she's there.
Right before we got on this call, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was telling her that maybe we have become more anxious is because we can track people constantly. Like the minute you joined the meeting, I got an email saying that he's here. You have to also go to the meeting. We didn't have that back then. Even when I was growing up, I'm a 90s kid. Then there was no way of tracking. I think it's because you can track people constantly. That was not there when we were growing up.
Oh, it's true. I mean, just like you said, all these reminders of meetings, you had to remember that, or you wrote it down, or you had it on your planner or something like that. No, it wasn't like that for us. So yeah, it's funny. I had to keep that in mind. And I think that helped with it. And it made it a little easier to kind of create the drama, or the kind of the story, but it's also true to the time too. So that helped.
So you said, after the fourth book, you've planned to end the books after Brandon graduates. But do you have any plans of continuing the story into his adult life?
I don't, actually. It's kind of a finite thing. I have the story of, I know how it ends. I've had that kind of in mind. So I've actually kind of thrown in a few hints as to what happens in the end. They're very small, but I kind of kept that in mind throughout my writing. So no, I actually have it ending around just before they start to enter college, which would be around September of, that would have been 1989. So that would be after they graduated high school, and maybe a few months after that. And, but no, I don't have, I have a definitive plan where to end it. Somebody's asked me if I want to put a prologue, like maybe put something where where the story takes place maybe 10 years or 15 or 20 years after. So just to kind of show where people maybe where they ended up and what happened to them. So I may do that. But I'm still kind of iffy on that. I think I can send it. I think the way I'm going to end it, I think it'll make sense when I get there.
Okay. Now I'm going to come back to the writing of the book. Not this book particularly, but do you have a particular writing process?
Well, what I used to do before I got sick, I was always write everything down. I'd have a notebook. I wrote it in pencil too. That was the other thing. I made sure that I had a pencil, I'd have a notebook, and I would write everything all the way through. Kind of scratch it here, on my notebook, erased it here, kind of, do all the things, do everything with it. But after I got sick, I wasn't really able to use, I lost the use of my right arm. Yeah, so I had to do everything left-handed, which is not my dominant hand. So I thought, well, I got to change the way I do this. So I started writing kind of on the computer. I used to end with the computer, where I take all my notes, put it aside, and just kind of transcribe it. But now I transitioned to using my tablet, so it's smaller. Like the Zoom call we're on, this is my computer, my laptop. But I don't write on this. It's just it's not my thing. So because the tablet's so small, it makes it easier for me to see it and kind of just work with it. So it feels more like the way I used to write, where I'd actually have this tablet, where I'd actually have a notebook to do it. So I end up writing, and I used to have outlines. I do have some notes still. I have notes on my, here, there, and everywhere, just kind of hitting certain scenes, certain, maybe bits of dialogue that I want to put in there. But yeah, I mean, it's an ever-changing process. I think I used to have a certain amount of time to write, but after our son was born, that changed. He's 14 now, but during this time when I was writing it, I mean, you can't you can just say, oh, Dad's got to work. You kind of have to stop what you're doing and then, take care of your son and make sure you feed him, play with him, change him, whatever it was. And then I would just kind of go back to it when I could, So that's changed for me too. I think if you have a process, just kind of find a way to do it. And even if it means 10 minutes at a time, or maybe you get an hour for yourself, maybe, you just kind of find that process and kind of work with it. So for me, it's always been an ever-changing thing. And I think that's helped me too, because then I can kind of get back into that zone quicker, because I know it's like, all right, I know I have like this much time. I know I'm going to be able to do it. Let's just put the time into it and let's just do it here. So that's how it works. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you have something. Sometimes you just kind of you just chalk it up and say, well, I got something that I didn't like. So at least maybe next time I'll get something that I do like.
Okay. And who have been your writing influences? Were you inspired by somebody in particular to start writing?
I always liked Hemingway. I liked his style. He's very much a kind of a fly. I called it a fly in the wall kind of writer, where he talks about exactly what is happening around you and he didn't go into great depth into a lot of things. So he's kind of a minimalist as a writer, just kind of, when he shows you the world, it's up to you to make that decision as to what's happening in it. But he'll show it to you. So I've always been influenced by him. I'm influenced by a lot of movies too, and like somebody like Steven Spielberg, who knows how to tell a story, or somebody like Martin Scorsese, who knows how to show it visually. And kind of, there's a lot of there's lots of ways to tell a story, and when you're writing, you got to be able to use all of your senses. It's not just, even though it's on paper, you got to be able to show what it sounds like, what it smells like, what it feels like. You kind of have to have that, all of those sensations and all of your senses involved in the story, and that kind of draws people in. So I keep these things in mind visually when I'm writing it. I'll think of the scene and just kind of, all right, what's on the table? What are they wearing? What does it feel like outside? What's the weather like? That sort of thing. Maybe there's food nearby, something like that.
Do you have any advice or anything that you wish to tell aspiring authors?
Well, keep going. it's hard. It's a lonely process. It's by nature, it's a solitude. It's a solitary process. Anybody who's tried to write anything, you kind of, you're doing this basically by yourself. And when you're writing, you're editing yourself. You are listening to what you think. You're listening to the voices in your head. You're looking at whatever it is around you. The only thing I can say is it's different for everybody, and it's a matter of how you like to do it. Some people like writing in the morning. Some people like writing at night. Some people need to be able to lie down when they're writing. Some people, I knew there was this girl that I knew that when we were in college, we were working in the library, and she had to sit on the floor. Like, she would lay down on her stomach on the floor and write. And she said that was her process. I was like, okay, we'll make some room for you. Just don't step on her. So it's a different thing for everybody. I try to have, I just kind of have a time where, all right, I know I'm going to be writing. This is my time here. So I'll have my coffee ready. I'll have my breakfast here. I'll have my music on. I usually plug in and hear whatever it may be. Something, depending on the scene, sometimes the music helps. So I'm able to kind of draw from the emotion of the music, whether it's, if it's an action scene and you need a kind of more upbeat music. Otherwise, and if it's a sad scene, then you might look for something that's a little more melancholy. But I think the only thing you can do is everybody's got a story. If you've got one, don't be afraid to tell it, and learn from other writers. Take your classes, read a lot of books. I think that helps too, because then you can kind of get a feel for your own style from how they write it. I mean, you learn, why did they do that? Why is that word choice? Why was that scene set? You don't have to plagiarize. That's a completely different thing. But you can be inspired by just about any other art form out there. And there are times when I used to go to a museum and I just kind of look at the paintings, and that would give me an idea of what to write for my book. It's a completely different medium, but that works because you're inspired by other artists. And what you kind of think about, what got them to this place? What were they thinking about when they painted this? What was this writer thinking about seeing this scene when he or she wrote it? So you can find inspirations everywhere, and it's just a matter of putting that story down the way you want to tell it.
You just spoke about how you have your morning routine where you have your coffee and your breakfast and you sit down and work. One of the things that I have also noticed some writers face, I'm sure it's not a thing that everybody faces, but some of them face a problem where people don't tend to take writing seriously. They're forced to do other chores, or they're just asked to reschedule. Why it's just writing, you can reschedule it. Like, do you have any advice for them? Because a lot of writers have faced this.
Yeah, writing's a craft, just like a lot of other things. I mean, if you're a carpenter and you try to build a shelf and you don't know how to use your tools, you're probably not going to make a very good shelf. You have to measure and you have to cut and you have to make sure that it'll fit. You don't want to put something that's too big and too small or too wonky or out of shape. So writing is kind of the same. You have to kind of you have to kind of practice with it. You can keep writing and then edit later. That's part of it too, where, it's not quite the same as being a carpenter, because if you're a carpenter, you have to measure twice and cut once. That's the whole adage, right? Yep. But as a writer, you can just keep writing and say, okay, let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, then you can take a look at it later. Or maybe the scene is better in a different scene. Maybe these characters fit somewhere else. Or maybe this isn't something they should say or do. But it's all there, and it's something that you can use along the way. But if you don't do it, if you're not working on it, then you'll never grow. I mean, you have to keep trying. You have to make those mistakes. That's the other thing about being a writer. And like anything else, you have to work on it, and you're going to make mistakes. and that's okay. That's just that's all part of the process. You know, one of the best things going through school when I was in college was getting, you know, I'd turn in a paper and there would be it would be marked with red everywhere because my professor had to say, instead of this, use this. Well, this works. So this is great. This doesn't work. Try this. And you know, when you first do it, you're kind of discouraged because you say, oh my gosh, I made all these mistakes. This is terrible. I'm a terrible writer. I don't want to do it. Well, you are. You are at first. Everybody is. So you have to kind of keep working at it, and then you'll figure out what does work for you. I still make a ton of mistakes, but that's okay. I've kind of gotten used to that. So you have to understand that that's part of the process. So, you know, you got to work at the craft, just like anything else. You're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be great right away. You're not going to be good right away.
Yeah.
But if you kind of keep at it and you know what you're looking to do, you've got half the battle there. You know, you have an idea. That's great. That's half the battle. But 50% is only that. You know, in school, 50% is a failing grade. So you have to be able to work at it. You have to craft it. You have to fix it. You have to add to it. You have to subtract from it. So those are all the things I can think of. I mean, there's so many other things that you can do. All I can just make your mistakes. It's okay. You know, everybody does.
Okay, and I have my final question, which is, what are you currently reading? Or are you too busy with the promotion of the book that you did not get any time to read?
You know, it's too bad. I don't get to read as much. I think the last book I read was by John Green. I think I read...
It's his birthday today.
What did I read? What's that?
It's John Green's birthday today, 24th August.
So what did I read? I read Looking for Alaska. I read that recently. What else have I read? It's hard. I am spending most of my time writing, so I don't get too much time to read anymore. I think that's the last book that I read. And but when you're writing, it's kind of like it was something in college that I used to read all the time. Just because I'm reading other people's work, I'm reading, you know, whatever my textbook said. But these days, not so much. And I can't say I'm reading too much because I'm too busy writing. So, you know, I know that's a shame. I'd like to read. I'd like to be reading more books, but.
But is it also a conscious decision? Because a lot of times writers avoid reading because they say that you tend to be subconsciously influenced by the books that you're reading at the moment. So a lot of writers tend to stay away from reading when they are writing.
I understand that. I can see that happening for some. But for me, actually, you know, like I was saying, art inspires me. So if it's a painting or a movie or another book, I'm okay to look at it. I know I try to keep in mind where it came from, so that way I'm not copying it. But I do try to keep keep an eye on other people's work just to see. It's like, you know, there's something good there that will help me. And it's, you know, they can be an homage. You can have an homage to it, or it can just be something to kind of look at maybe as an example to follow, and just say, okay, see, they're able to do this. How can I do it in my way? How do I tell the story my way? How do I show this scene the way I want to tell it? And so I understand that other people don't want to do that because it is distracting. But I look at it a different way, where I think you can be inspired by somebody else's work, other arts, other forms of art, and just kind of enjoy it for that and be inspired by it.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Aniesha. Thank you for staying up. I know it's early here. I know it's late for you, so I appreciate you staying up.
Thank you. No problem. I'm going to stop recording now.